Our topic today is mental health. And mental health, mental well-being, mental unwell-being is something that touches each and every one of us. It may be that you are struggling with your own mental health. It may be that someone in your family is struggling. It may be that you see the far too frequent reports in the news of someone who's struggling to maintain a sense of mental equilibrium. I know I've had periods in my life where depression, a cloud of darkness, sat over me for some time. And we know that this is a tender topic, which is why I thought it would be useful to center this topic in a place where it can be held with love, where we can broach this topic with what we know is needed for each of us. And that's the understanding that we're not alone. Whatever we're struggling with, we are not the first person who has dealt with it, and we're not going to be the last. And with a topic that is being presented like this, we know that feelings could arise. We're approaching this service with love and hope, and we're asking that you take care of yourself. So if something gets, stirred in you and you need to take a drink of water, do that. If you want to go down and, just spend some time in the quiet of the really lovely library downstairs, do that. If you need to talk to somebody, there are people in the congregation who are here for you. Castera was going to assist with this service. She is a social worker, but unfortunately she's not feeling well today, so Shannon's going to share in some of the readings. So what we have today are a series of readings about this topic, and they center the ideas of human kindness, love, and the importance of remembering that mental health and spiritual health go hand in hand. So the first reading I have was by Barbara Myers. She says, Dr. Mark Reagans is a staff psychiatrist at the Village. This is an integrated service and agency in Long Beach, California that's renowned for its success in treating difficult psychiatric cases, often involving homelessness, schizophrenia, and substance abuse. And he says, when I ask psychiatric patients who have done well what I did that was helpful to them, they almost always recount some moment of human connectedness. It was when you hugged me, and I could tell that you knew how much it pained me to have my children taken away. It was when you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. It was when you lent me $5 when I knew that you probably should not have done that. It was when you drove me home from the hospital in your car even though I smelled awful. It was when I knew that you really cared and you would not give up on me. In other words, it was when they were the recipient of an act of human kindness or when someone believed in them. These moments are what help in healing. And here is where the faith community comes in. People of faith are experts in human kindness. This congregation cares for one another so well. We can believe in people. We can see something inside of them that they may not be able to see themselves. We can give acceptance and love even when an illness is untreated or a person feels hopeless. And these may be the central factors in someone's recovery.
I'm definitely not Cass, and I do not come with a wide background in social work. But when Cindy asked if I'd fill in today, I was happy to do this reading. Whenever I prepared and read through it, there was a word that stuck out to me that I'll be sharing with you, and that word is broken. And that there's the word trigger that's often overused, but in this case it was appropriate. mental illness, there's a stigma behind it. I think that that's changing and shifting, but just like a cycle of abuse or a cycle of poverty needs to be broken. It needs to be stepped out of. Several years ago, when I myself knew that I needed to talk to someone, I kept that close from my parent, whose comment when I later revealed it was, "Why did you go to a therapist? You're not broken." And that would imply broken infers that something's no longer perfect. I was never perfect to begin with, and neither are you. We're all perfectly imperfect. Kate Landis wrote this called Depression, the Family Curse. It was the family curse. I had heard the term muttered by my grandmother, the family curse, but I didn't know what it meant. It sounded like something from a pirate story, like my ancestors had stolen a magic treasure and now we were all damned unless one of us could slay the dragon. Alas, our family curse was nothing so exciting. Our family secret is soul-sucking depression, a hopeless morass of despair that is nearly impossible to shake. The multi-generational curse of dads crying on the beach, the curse that led to suicides, aunts who never left the house, terrible tempers spinning out of anxiety attacks, dropping out, getting fired. I wasn't the only one in the family with compulsions who prayed frantically for a sense of control. The family curse was real, and Dad was under its spell. Later, I would have a few turns as well, an emotional riptide pulling me under the waves. Freeing myself took more strength than I could muster, but I was pulled from the crashing surf by the people who love me. I am broken, respectfully, yet beloved, imperfect but cherished. I felt them as real as the saltwater breeze, pulling me unflaggingly through the current. I tell my story to accompany fellow travelers trying to make it back to the shore.
This next reading is by Alina Kemmler. I first visited a children's psychiatric unit 22 years ago. The boy's mother and I stood facing one another in the hallway by the locked door, not saying a word because there was nothing to say. He was 10 years old and seemed to not want to live. He had been putting belts and yo-yo strings around his neck. I reached toward her and put my hand on the flat place beneath her collarbones, the place where sadness collects in my own body. I was a new minister then, and guarding against such intimate gestures had not yet become a habit. Much later, she told me that it had helped, that in that moment she felt less like the only mother in the world who had ever had a suicidal child. I visited the boy every few days, getting buzzed in through the locked doors. Soon we had a routine of finding a quiet place on the floor to play chess and checkers. He beat me every game, partly because I had forgotten anything resembling strategy, and also because I was paying more attention to the songs we sang while we played. He began this musical conversation on the second visit, humming under his breath as he moved his pieces, and then he started adding words. Mostly the words were about what was happening on the board. I am going to jump you, he sang. If I move like this, you cannot jump me, I sang back. I wondered if he was singing me another, truer song underneath. So I was listening carefully and trying to choose what to sing back. You are doomed, there's no way out, he sang as he claimed another of my checkers. I am not doomed, I answered. There is always another chance as long as you keep playing. He never protested when I got ready to go, but sometimes as I walked him back to his room, he held my hand and leaned his head against my arm. On those days, I cried in the parking lot. I wanted so much to believe that God was watching over this boy, that God was tender and protective and fiercely on the side of life, and that this boy would not slip away. Months later, after he left the hospital, the boy presented me with a combined game of chess and checkers during a church service. He told the congregation we had played a lot together when he was in the hospital with sadness, and that he beat me every single time. This game is for you, so you don't forget how to play, he told me. The boy is a man now. He's married and has good work and 2 little ones of his own. He has not been lost, and I have not forgotten.
Our family Friday night had an opportunity to have dinner with 2 very wonderful people who are in this room right now. And one of the things that I had shared as an educator is that we recently had one of our students hospitalized because the mental illness that is carried in every aspect of your life, and life moves on, and you're expected to be a functioning member of society. And there are things in place for this when children are in school. There are things called IEPs, there are things called 504s. An IEP is an individualized education plan, and that's generally for students who have learning or intellectual needs and the modifications that we make to help them be successful. Where a 504 is a legal document that is often outlining specific diagnoses, such as perhaps ADHD, anxiety, reduced vision and hearing, and so forth. We as educators are not permitted to recommend to a parent that they seek this type of documentation. That must come from a physician. However, when we're with them so many hours in a day, we often see those needs coming through, and all we want to do is help. I'm really hoping that this young person is getting the help that is needed. As an educator, I've seen a definite increase in IEPs and 504s following children to school. I'm hopeful that's because the stigma is being removed so that help can be given. And to that end, here's a story from Barbara E. Myers called No Casserole Diseases. In the course of my ministry to people with mental health issues and their loved ones, a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation told me the following story. Her daughter was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The condition affected her everyday life, and she had been repeatedly hospitalized. When her mother told me this story, her daughter had been in a psychiatric ward for several weeks. The family was endeavoring to visit her every evening, often rushing from work to the hospital, just grabbing from the refrigerator anything that might serve for dinner on their way out the door. Meanwhile, her husband had been asked if he could provide a meal for a family in the congregation who had a family member recovering from a serious operation. He agreed, cooked a meal, rushing with his wife and delivered it to the family, while skipping a meal himself and rushing to the wife with a psychiatric hospital to visit their daughter. Neither the minister nor anyone in the congregation was visiting her, nor had they been asked to do so. After a few days, his wife considered the situation and thought, wait a minute, why was he asked to prepare a meal for a family with a hospitalized member when we are in a similar situation and no one's bringing us a meal? Is there a double standard here? It is common practice in most Unitarian Universalist faith communities to offer many forms of pastoral care to people and families coping with trauma or physical illness. Mental illnesses are sometimes called no casserole diseases. People don't bring casseroles to homes where someone's hospitalized for mental problems, discomfort, unexamined assumptions about mental health, mental illness, and cultural norms isolate people and families who are in desperate need of community support.
The last reading I'm sharing today is again by Barbara Myers. While many treatments, practices, and lifestyle changes can aid in recovery from mental health problems, studies have shown that one of the most important is spirituality. Spiritual practice is one of the primary coping mechanisms for people dealing with problems such as that. Many people can find hope in the faith that they are being held by someone or something larger than themselves. This might be God, the human spirit, the universe, whatever one wants to call it. This faith is at the core of many addiction recovery programs, including 12-step programs. It can allow them to surrender to an entity that receives them unconditionally, to know that they do not suffer alone, and to hope that things can get better. People need spiritual community, not just because they're lonely. They need to be included in a congregation's spiritual development opportunities, both formal and informal. For instance, both a sermon and conversation about it at the potluck or coffee hour afterwards. And it's all of us need this support. Whatever you might be carrying personally, family members, looking at the world, you're not alone. In many cases, depression particularly is the appropriate response, just feeling weighted down by the trials of the world. That is when we need one another especially. It's a delight to share our joys with one another, and it's when we're struggling that the hope is that you will find those people to speak to that can just hold you and journey with you, knowing that we can't fix another person, but we can certainly be there for people. Make sure that you reach out to someone that has your back. You are loved, and anything that you might consider to be brokenness does not mean that you are less than beautiful, that you are less than whole. Please make sure you reach out.